the first thing you're going to need to do is open up a Google Chrome window and click on images and search for something along the lines of zombie walking clip art. It's best if you include the word clip art or cartoon, otherwise they're going to be realistic and we won't be able to easily transfer that into a drawing. So I like the look of this one here, so I'm going to click on the small thumbnail image to make it larger, and then all I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this image and go to copy image. I'm then going to open up Flash and I'm going to go to create new action script 3, and we should get our blank stage here. What I'm then going to do before we start anything is I'm going to create something called a symbol. So a symbol can be like an animation within an animation, and you'll see why we need to do that later on. So to start with, I'm going to go to insert and then new symbol. I'm making sure that I choose movie clip because our symbol is actually going to move. It doesn't make too much of a difference, just changes the icon. I'm going to change it from symbol 1 and I'm going to call this one zombie and press enter to create the symbol. All that really will happen is the screen will go pretty much completely white, and we're now working inside the zombie symbol up here, which is inside scene 1. So we've kind of got a new symbol inside scene 1. And all I'm going to do to start with is double click on layer 1 down here, and I'm going to call this layer image because this is the image that we've got from the internet. I'm then just going to go to edit and paste in center, and you'll see that our image of a zombie appears here. In order for us to draw this, one of the easiest things to do is to trace it. So what I'm going to do to start with is I'm going to click on this image here, and at the moment we can't change how see-through it is. We can't change its opacity. So I'm going to right click on the zombie image and I'm going to convert that to a symbol as well. This time this one isn't going to move, so I'm just going to change this one to be a graphic, and I'm going to call it image because this again is the image that we got off the internet. And press enter, and what that now does, you'll see up here, is we've now got a new option for color effects. Yours might be minimized, so click on the arrow to maximize the color effect. Select alpha from the drop down box and then use this slider to get it so that the image is visible so that you could trace it but a little bit more see-through. So I'm going to go with 32%. You can pick one that looks correct for your image. Now that I'm happy with this image, I'm going to go down to the layer down here called image, and I'm going to lock it by clicking on the dot under the padlock. That stops us from accidentally drawing on this layer. It won't let us at all. So I need another layer now on top of this that allows me to trace parts of this image. So I'm going to right mouse click on image on the layer down here, and I'm going to go to insert layer. I'm going to double click on it and I'm going to rename this one body, as this is just going to contain the zombie's body. You'll notice that it's already selected that layer for us. And now essentially what I need to do is trace out the body, but it's quite small and difficult to do. So I'm going to on mine zoom into 800%, and then I'm going to try and find whereabouts the zombie has now disappeared to, which is over here. So you might need to move these bars around a little bit just so that you can find your image if it disappears. So I can see the whole body on mine here. You may need to pick a different zoom if you can't see the entire body part of your zombie. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to choose the brush tool from over here, and I'm going to choose the fill color as black, as I just want to draw the outline initially. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to trace around the entire part of this image. Now you'll notice the first bit up here we can't see because it's behind his chin and his neck, so I'm not going to be able to trace around here. I'm going to need to draw straight across where I think the shirt would go. And I'm going to trace this entire thing, trying not to leave any gaps. So the less times you can take your finger off the held down mouse button, the better, because you definitely won't have a gap while it's being held down. You probably won't get around the whole thing in one go, so you will have to at some point let go and try not to leave any gaps. I'll speed the video up so that you don't have to sit and watch me tracing this entire thing, but just take your time and it will look really effective.
A few moments later.
Okay, so I've now traced around the whole shirt. I've tried not to leave any gaps, and we won't really know if I have until we select the fill bucket tool from over here, And I'm going to change the colour to whatever colour I want his shirt. I'm going to stick with something similar to the one that was in the image beforehand, but you can obviously change it to be whatever you like. So I'm going to click in there, and as you can see, it's filled in with colour, so I've left no gaps. If it doesn't work when you click that, you must have left a gap somewhere, so you just need to check all of your crossover points in your corners and check with the brush tool. You might need to go over it again and just make sure there's no gaps. So I'm then going to try and do the same to fill in the skin colour for the zombie. Now again, you can mess about and choose whichever colour that you like. I'm just going to be relatively quick and pick one, just a normal kind of green colour over here. And as you can see, luckily I've left no gaps and we've been able to fill in the entire thing. We now obviously need to draw the head, but actually what I want the head to do is move as the zombie's walking, sort of it nodding forward slowly. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we have the body and the head on separate layers so that the head can move independently of the body. So to start with, what I'm going to do, because I've finished with the body layer now, I'm going to click on the dot underneath the padlock for the body layer so that we're not accidentally going to draw on this and get it on the wrong layer. What I then need to do is I need to right mouse click and go to insert layer, and of course for this one I am going to call it head because this is where we're drawing the zombie's head. Press enter and it will set it as that name. Now I'm going to scroll up slightly just so that we can see where it is that we're going to draw. Now because we need to draw the chin and the neck and we can't actually see that to trace it, what I'm going to do temporarily is I'm just going to hide the body layer by clicking on the dot underneath the eye so that I can then draw on here the chin and the neck that would have otherwise been hidden behind the bit that we've just drawn. So I'm clicking on the dot underneath the eye just so that we can hide it temporarily. So making sure that I'm on the correct layer, the head layer, which has gone blue, I'm going to again use the brush tool and I'm going to set it to the black outline colour, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to trace the neck part of this image. I'll then be able to go on and draw the rest of the head. So I'm just going to do this little bit first down the bottom so that we can put the rest of the image back and just check that we're happy with it before we move on to the rest. So I'm just going to draw the bit that I believe was hidden behind the shirt that we drew. So I'm just going to draw up to there. I'm then going to click on the cross here and you can see that it's joined up quite nicely. Don't worry that this has gone over here, and once we fill it all in, hopefully that'll look really good. So I'm just going to hide it again just so that it's out of the way and I'm not getting confused with which one I'm drawing. So I'm then just going to trace the rest of it, and I'll speed up the video so you don't have to sit and watch me draw.
More moments later.
Okay, so I've traced around it. I've decided to leave out this, which I think is a bow. It's up to you. You might have a different image completely, but I've decided to leave that one out of mine. What I'm then going to do, again, I'm going to use the fill bucket tool and I'm going to start filling in these colours. Now, because I want the exact same skin colour, and I can't remember which one I chose, what I'm going to do temporarily is I'm going to unhide this layer because I can use something called the dropper tool. So I click on the fill colour here, and then I can use the dropper to select the colour green that I'd already picked. And now I have the exact colour green. So I can go up here and I can start to fill in all the parts that need to be green. So for the hair colour, I'm just going to choose a new colour, possibly some kind of brown up here. I'm going to fill in that. And the eye colour was kind of an off-white for mine, so I'm going to go with a slightly yellow white. And I stick with the same colour for the teeth and fill all those in. And then I need sort of a red colour. I'm going to go with a dark red for the eyes, and then maybe something slightly darker again for the inside of the mouth. So then hopefully now it should all start to come together. So when you get to this stage, what we're going to do is we're going to start to make it so that we can make the head bob forward. And before we do that, because we've now finished with the image, the layer behind that we were tracing, I'm going to right click on that and I'm just going to delete the layer. Now, as I said, I want the head to bob backwards and forwards as this zombie's moving. So I'm going to do about 6 different frames of movement. If I need to make that longer, we can. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to unlock the body layer, and I'm on frame 6, going to right mouse click, and I'm going to insert a keyframe. And what that does is it chops his head off. That's because on frame 6 we now have the body. However, for the body layer, but on the head layer for frame 6 we don't have a copy of the head yet. We will in a moment, but we're going to do these frame by frame to make it look like the head is bobbing. In order to do that, you need to click back onto the first frame of layer 1. In fact, before we do that, I'm going to lock the body layer so we don't break it by clicking the dot. So click on frame 1 of the head layer. And what we're going to do, you'll notice that everything is already selected as soon as I click on that frame. So as I click on frame 1, everything's selected because it's gone sort of a crosshatch colour. So with everything selected, I'm going to go to the selection tool and I'm going to right mouse click anywhere over the head that we've drawn, and I'm going to convert it to a symbol. It's just going to be a graphic, and I'm going to call it head and press OK. And what that does is it groups it all together basically. So now we've got this blue line around everything, and it means that we can rotate it and things like that a lot easier. So what we're going to do is I'm going to click on the image with the right mouse button and go to free transform. And what that does is it puts your usual kind of resize and rotate options on here. Now what I'm going to do, you'll notice that there is a tiny dot right in the center. That is its pivot point. Now if I move, so if I just demonstrate that, if I rotate it, you'll see that the whole picture rotates around that dot. Now we don't want that happening because that's making the neck move. So what we're going to do is we're going to move this pivot point down here to where the neck is, so that when we rotate it, it rotates around the neck, which is obviously where you would expect it to. So I've moved that down to the bottom and made sure everything's nicely where we need it to be. So on the layer 1, what I want his head to be slightly, not a lot, but slightly tilted back. What I'm then going to do on frame 2, I'm going to click on it, right mouse click and insert a keyframe. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to rotate his head slightly further forward, and I'm going to repeat that process. On frame 3, I'm going to insert a keyframe and I'm going to rotate it further forward. On frame 4, I'm going to insert a keyframe and I'm going to rotate it slightly back, so that by the time we get back to the start point, it's almost in the same place. Now you're going to have to click between the frames to check that. So it's slightly further back on 1 than it is on 5. So on my last keyframe here, insert keyframe, we need it to go back slightly. And this might just be a little bit of trial and error. And you can check it by pressing enter on the keyboard, and you'll see that his head now looks like it's nodding. Okay, and we're going to want that to repeat over and over again. However, that's quite quick. We might want to slow it down slightly, but you may not on yours, but you'll see the frame rate down here. This is how many of these little dots are played, or frames are played every second. So I'm going to roughly halve mine, there we go, 11, just as a try. So now when I do it, it's slightly slower. Might want it even slower than that, but we can always change this later on. So let's go with 7. Right, so it's a bit slower, a bit more sort of zombie-esque. So what I'm now going to do, I'm going to click up here so that we go back to our main scene. And what that'll do is it'll take us back to our blank stage right at the start. Now everything we've done hasn't disappeared, we're just back on the stage rather than the symbol that we were drawing. So to get our zombie onto the stage, we go to library up here, and you'll notice that we have one that's got a cog on it because we chose that it was a movie. It doesn't matter if yours hasn't, that says zombie. And I'm literally just going to drag and drop that onto here. And you can see that we've now got the zombie that we created. Now, we're now going to start making him move across the screen. He's slightly small potentially at the moment, so I'm going to make mine a little bit bigger so that it looks like this. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to move him off the screen and slightly below, so it looks like he's going to be walking across the screen like this. So I'm moving him completely off the screen and slightly below the bottom of the stage. Now before we do anything in terms of moving, I'm going to rename this layer to zombie because we are going to put some other things on here as well. And we're then going to put a keyframe in a little bit further along. So I'm going to go with mine as being on frame 60. Now we can always change this. So I'm going to right mouse click and I'm going to go to insert keyframe. Now what we've got at the moment then is we have a keyframe here on number 1 where the zombie is on the left, and on 60 he's currently still on the left, but we want it to move over to the right to make it look like he's walking across the screen. So I'm going to move him across here so that he disappears off the side of the screen. Now if I press enter, all that happens is he stays there until we get to frame 60, when it will jump to the other side. Now if you remember when we did tweening, we can make the computer do the hard work for us. So I can right mouse click anywhere between the two keyframes, and I can just say create a classic tween, and now when I press enter, it will move across the screen. Now again, it might be slightly slow because I chose 7 frames per second, so let's speed that up back up to about 10 or 11, and we press enter and it moves across the screen. Now you'll notice its head's not bobbing, and that's because we haven't exported the animation. To see it in its full glory, you're going to hold down Control on your keyboard, which will be the very bottom left-hand key, and press the Enter button. That will export your movie, and now you'll see that as the zombie moves across the screen, its head is bobbing. So I'm going to close that off, and we can start to add the next part to the animation. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in a new layer by right-clicking on the zombie layer and going to Insert Layer, double-clicking on it, and we're going to call this one Text because this is where our writing is going to be. As always, I'm going to lock the zombie layer because I'm happy with it so that we can't accidentally put anything on there. So I'm going to go to the very start of the animation, and what I want is I want it to say Zombie School across the top. So I'm going to click on the text tool, and I'm going to just click somewhere onto the screen, and I'm going to type in Zombie School, and it's not very nice writing as you can see at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to change it to something more appropriate. For example, I think there's one called Chiller. So let's just have a little look, that might be more appropriate. So I'm going to change that to Chiller, and it's quite small. So here in the size, I'm going to hold my mouse down and drag the mouse to the right, and you'll see that the text gets bigger, and we can just pick one that looks more appropriate. So we want it a bit like that, maybe, so that it's along the top. Now the colour is kind of a brown colour at the moment. I'm going to change that to be a bit more of a red colour, like that. And then what I'm going to do, I'm just going to use the arrow tool to move that to where I want it to be. Okay, so now if I press Control and Enter, you will see that the word Zombie School appears at the top. But what I also want it to do is, as the zombie goes across, I want it to reveal the words Out Now, because this is the release of a new game. So I'm going to close that one off. I'm going to move that down slightly just so it's a bit more in an appropriate position. Now what I need to do is I need to find the frame where the zombie is going to start to pass across the screen where I want the word Out Now to be, which for me is roughly around 24, but it could be different for you. Now what I need to do then, on frame 24, I'm going to right mouse click and I'm going to insert a keyframe. Making sure I'm still on number 24, I'm just going to click anywhere on the screen because I can move it in a moment. I'm going to type in the word out, and then I'm going to use the black arrow selection tool to move that so that it is roughly hiding behind his head. Okay, so I'm going to put mine about there. Now as you'll see at the moment, the writing is on top of the zombie's head, and it doesn't look very effective. So what I'm going to do down here, I'm going to hold my mouse down and drag the text layer under the zombie layer so that the word out has now disappeared behind his head. So what I can now do is, if I press enter, the head won't bob, but what you'll see happening is the word out appears as if from magic behind his head. What's actually happening is, if we hide the zombie layer, the right one, what's actually happening is, as it plays, the word out just appears, but because it's behind his head, it makes it look like it's being revealed. So let's just put the zombie back on. I now essentially need to do the same thing, but for when it goes over where I want the word now to be. So I think it's roughly going to be there. So I'm going to right mouse click, making sure I'm on the text layer, and I'm going to insert a keyframe. And again, I'm going to go back to the text tool. I'm just going to click anywhere on the screen. I'm going to write the word now, and I'm going to use the black arrow selection tool to move it roughly in line with the other text, but hiding behind his head. And now what I can do is, if I press Control and Enter, hopefully that will all work nicely. And as he moves across the screen, it looks like he's revealing the words Out Now.